Today's episode is one of those conversations that reminds you that business, at its core, is deeply human. I sit down with three incredible leaders, Jennifer Luce, John Miller, and Rich Clark, all of whom chose to merge their firms with RTM. They share the behind the scenes of that decision, what they gained, what they gave up, and how the transition impacted not just their day-to-day roles, but their teams, their careers, and even their sense of belonging. If you've ever wondered what it really feels like to go through a merger and to find yourself on the other side feeling more at home than ever, this one's for you. I'm Katherine Jelinek, your host for Beyond Engineering, a podcast from RTM Engineering Consultants, where a genuine devotion to people and their passions empowers us to grow together, lead with integrity, and make a meaningful impact. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited for this episode today. So we have a rock star panel today here to share their experiences, especially from the vantage of going through the process of merging with RTM. Excited today to welcome John Miller, Rich Clark, and Jennifer Luce coming together for this episode, giving us an inside look as owners and leaders of companies that chose to merge with RTM. So just to start us off, everyone, can you share your name, where you are, your location physically, your office location, the years since the merge, and prior to the merge, your role in the company, your firm? Okay, Rich, you want to start us off?
Sure. Rich Clark. I'm based in Irvine, California. Merged in 2020, so it's been about 5 years now. And I was the sole owner of my previous company, so did everything.
Hey, Jennifer.
Jennifer Luce. I'm located in Springfield, Missouri. We've been part of RTM for about 7 years, so we merged in 2018. And I was one of 6 partners when we merged.
John Miller, and I'm in Springfield, Missouri, and we merged about 2 years ago. I was one of the founders of J&M Engineering with my partner, Ben Jennings.
Wonderful. So welcome to each of you. The first area that we're going to talk about is life before the merge. So share a little insight into what was your day-to-day before merging with RTM? What was life like? And share little details like how big was the firm? How many people were in it? How many years had you been in business? What was your engineering focus or specialty? And what hats were you wearing then? Jennifer, you want to start?
Sure. So we had about 25 people before, and before the merger, we had 2 offices. So one was in Springfield, and then we had an office in Overland Park. We do mechanical, electrical, plumbing design, and that's exclusively what our 2 offices did at the time. And before we had 6 partners, so each partner kind of had a different role. I would say I was probably more on the operational side, kind of managing our local projects here. The company was founded about 32 years before the merger. So it was pretty much the original group that had made the original company before the merger. And really most of what I would say my kind of role has kind of stayed similar. We can talk some about how that changed a little bit later in the podcast, but yeah.
But the hats you were wearing were more operational for the...
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Yep. Cool. John, you want to go?
Sure. J&M Engineering was a structural firm here in Springfield, Missouri, and we were actually introduced to RTM through Jennifer's firm, people at her firm. We've been in business about 12 years at the time of the merger, and there were 14 of us here in Springfield. We did work all over the country, and then as a co-owner, there were 2 partners, and so we wore all the hats. You know, we were doing the marketing, the billing, the accounting, the production as well, and making sure that and the quality control. So, and since then, I've been able to take off a few hats, and that's been pretty nice.
Rich.
I guess I'm next, right? So, we were about a dozen people. I originally had a business partner, but during the recession took out that business partner. So I was the sole owner from about 2008 on. Civil engineering firm, focused on land development and water, wastewater primarily. and had some senior project managers and teams, but I was really functioning as the principal in charge on all the projects, so client facing, as well as doing all the business stuff, just like John was describing. So that was negotiating medical insurance, leases, you name it, making sure payroll gets run, all that good stuff. So I was
Hmm.
happy to shed many of those roles.
Right. So that's kind of my next question is what was the biggest grind back in the day? Like when, you know, pre-merge and you were wearing more hats, or Jennifer, it sounds like it's quite similar to the role you have now, but was there a grind? Or, and if there was, what was the biggest one for you?
Yeah,
Anyone?
there is definitely a grind in terms of the medical insurance, negotiating leases, um, HR compliance, just all the things that aren't really related to the core. I got into engineering to solve problems and work with clients, and that's where my passion is, and developing teams. So anything that isn't in that bucket, frankly, is a grind or a pain, and was happy to shed some of
Yeah, and I would agree with Rich. I was our HR person, which is, I used to tell people I was a lawsuit waiting to happen just because of my HR skills. But I agree, the negotiating the insurance and all those types of things and the leases and the things not dealing with engineering were things that I was very happy to give that hat away.
How much of your time was spent doing those kinds of things?
I would probably say probably 5 hours a week, maybe. Just, because I was dealing with employees, if they wanted to make a change in their insurance or something, I was the one that had to follow that through, or payroll or those kind of things. So, yeah, I was very happy to give that up.
Yeah. And with those things, sometimes it's not even as much the hour as the attention shift, the
Right.
content switch between this and that and putting the different hats, switching between the hats
Yes.
is a burn.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could chime in that all our offices were kind of similar, right? We're offices of engineers. We're not offices having a lot of extra auxiliary staff, and so dealing with all those things that aren't directly engineering related were definitely harder for us to manage. And while that it wasn't my hat that I wore, there was other people that had to do the research. I mean, we still had to spend time and discuss, which plan we had to moving forward, even on our side of things like marketing and some of those things, putting those things together, we were trying to do a lot of that ourselves. We had some help, but um, having the corporate support for all of those items has been really great.
Yeah. It's an easy benefit to see. So let's talk about how the journey began with RTM. I want to just hear how each of you were even approached, or did you approach them, or where was the opening?
Yeah, I guess I can kind of start. So for us, we were kind of in a weird transition point. So we had kind of reached out just kind of in the public market just to see kind of what was out there and available. And I wouldn't say we necessarily had any great leads initially. And somehow we got connected up that RTM was looking for merger companies. And so one of our other partners kind of helped navigate that initially. But he started the conversations. Obviously, they kind of go both ways. It seemed like it was initially a good fit, cultural wise and operational wise. So just having a lot of those conversations, we had a lot of meetings with some of the corporate folks at the time, and then our senior leadership, and just kind of navigating through that process. You just have to have a lot of buy-in on both sides of things, and it seemed like a good fit. And so we just kind of navigated through that process, and then once initially kind of made sense on both sides, we did a vote amongst the partners, and so that's how it was kind of decided for us to move forward or not at the time.
Right. Just to follow up on that question, what was even the reason originally that you guys were shopping around? Like, you've been around for 32 years, right? So what caused the shift or the consideration to begin?
I mean, there was obviously several factors. I would say probably the most dominant factor is we're in Southwest Missouri, and we're kind of a little bit more limited on how we can branch out and grow. And so I think it was a good opportunity for us to kind of expand our services and staffing opportunities. Was I would say probably the main reason we were kind of looking out at the time.
Makes sense. Rich or John, how did the opening even begin?
I think for us it was we weren't on the market. Ben and I, and then we had a third partner, Charles Taylor. We always said that if someone wanted to talk to us, we would listen, and we've been approached several times. And always right away we knew that those weren't a good fit. But I was actually on a site visit out in California, and Jennifer's partner Rod was in the same area, and we'd become friends over working together for 20 years. So I just called him up, and he happened to be in the same part of California. We went to dinner, and he said, "Hey, I'd really like to talk to you guys." And we knew that they had merged about 4 years earlier, 4 to 5 years earlier. And so Ben and I visited with Rod and set up an appointment, and Tony came down. We had lunch one day, about an hour, visited, and we were both intrigued enough to kind of continue the conversations. So from there, we started meeting more regularly with Tony and people on his side, and now we're here. So it's been a great thing. I'm
Hmm.
glad I made the phone call to Rod.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
a huge trajectory shifting moment. How about
Yes.
you? How did the journey begin for you, Rich?
Yeah, so mine was it was a journey. I had 10 or 15 years, let's call it, left in my career, the way I saw it, and um, the traditional way of transitioning the company was you develop young engineers, they gain leadership skills, and then there's this process of buyout. But it requires them to take on a bunch of debt, and that the next generation of my leaders weren't interested in that. There was a lot of pushback. So I went to market. I hired a broker, went to market. In hindsight, I'd never hire a broker again. But the one thing the broker did, I had a bunch of offers. Some of them were super lucrative, but they were bad culture fits. I couldn't see benefits for my team members. It felt like I was going backwards personally, or it just was a poor cultural fit. The broker did introduce me to Tony, and Tony and I just hit it off. And it was around the COVID time, so meeting was tough, and so we were doing a lot of stuff by phone. And culturally, our core values lined up almost identically. The way he looked at business, the way I thought about our business, so aligned. It was so aligned that I'm like, Tony, I think you're full of crap. I frankly, it sounds too good to be true. And he
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
okay, I hear you. Come on out and meet as many partners as you can. So I went out to Schaumburg headquarters and did that. I met as many partners as I could. And he wasn't full of crap. He's built a great company with a great culture. And I mean, Jennifer and John are examples of that. Just great people working together in alignment. And it was like a switch went off. It was, I'm in, let's do it. And so glad I did. I frankly wish I would have done it 10 years sooner.
And it's interesting you said that, Rich, because that's one thing I told Tony because same experience, we went to Schaumburg, we saw it, and I told Tony as we were getting ready to close, I think I said, man, I wish I was 47 instead of 57,
Yeah.
because, and from the very first day, after we signed the paperwork and we were RTM, we were welcomed, with really open arms. And it's not like, well, you're the new guys. It's like, you're one of us. You're part of the family now. And I've seen that with the firms that have come on after us. It's just like, you might as well have been here forever because Tony, that cultural fit that Rich was talking about is so huge, and it just makes that a very natural integration. So, yeah, so it's been great.
That. So here's my question is during the process, at what point were you most hesitant? Or was there any moment of hesitation or any moment of like, oh, is that a red flag? Even if it was your own stuff or no, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
any of it. Like, talk about the human elements of this. Like, where wasn't it like all green light?
I think anytime you merge, I mean, you don't really know what you're getting into until you're in there. I mean, I think from our standpoint, like you don't know if there's going to be limitations or how much they're going to dictate your day to day or what you do or how you do it. You know, like licensing for software. I mean, it's a big component of what we do. And so you don't really know exactly how that's going to evolve and be implemented. And just from that hesitation and that concern on my part, I would say it was generally flawless. I mean, for us, it was a little bit easier because we didn't even have to change accounting software, right? They were using the accounting software we were using before, which made it super easy. So for us, the transition was like almost like flawless because um, they're very much proponents for, you know, when a company comes in and merges, it's a good fit culturally, but there's a lot of reasons that we're merging together, right? So they provide good services, they provide quality engineering. It kind of aligns with the core values. So they don't come in and try to, you know, change what you're doing or reinvent the wheel, right? The wheel was working, so nobody merged in because the wheel wasn't working, so to speak. So um, from my perspective, that's been the best and the easiest part of the transition is you kind of took the benefit that the corporate group had to offer and utilized the good part that we were doing, which is, you know, the engineering part and the part that we're more passionate about and, you know, generally what we're better at, right?
Yeah. For me, it was that the only hesitations were early on, just making sure there was the culture fit I spoke about, but also as a civil engineer coming into an MEP firm, it's just like, are they going to get what we do? And there was a small piece of civil engineering in place. So I spent a lot of my energy trying to assess, you know, is that a red flag? Are they going to get it? Um, and at the end of the day, and really there was this moment of all in. And it was because I felt like I could trust the people that we were, and there was enough alignment that even if hurdles popped up, whatever they were, we were going to be able to work through them. Because that's ultimately the transition point for me is, can I trust these people to be true partners as we move forward in this transaction and afterwards? And yeah, it was a light switch moment, but it took a little time to build.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, you know, I think I was on board. I was wearing so many hats before that I was ready for a change and what Tony was offering, and we'd gone to Schaumburg as well, Ben and I, and I'd seen that, and I was ready for that change. My partner, he's younger. He's about 8 years younger than I am, and his process of getting to the point to pull the trigger was a little bit different. Took a little longer, and he's very analytical. And one of the big things for him was we actually went to lunch with Jennifer and her partner at the time, Cam Collins, and he'd actually voted no on the merger. Is that right, Jennifer?
That's correct. So we had 6 partners and 2 were against, and Cam was one of the against.
And Cam was one of them. But we went to lunch with Cam and Jennifer, and Ben was questioning them and going through all the process, and Cam told him, you know, I was against this, but in hindsight, it's the best thing we could have done, and the best thing. It's been a wonderful finish to his career as he's now retired, and that was the one thing I think more than anything else that made Ben see what the potential was and the opportunities to hear it from someone that he'd worked with for 20 years and trusted to make that kind of declaration.
Yeah. I'd say, you know, it's really lovely to get to be on the inside and get to talk to so many people from RTM. And I can see that from the outside. One of the hesitations could be similar to what you had in your journey, Rich, where it's like, this is too good to be true.
Right.
Like, I gotta go see you in person because the online dating is going too well. Like, this can't be real. And I always make the analogy when I'm telling people about RTM. I'm like, it's like a good family. It's not like there aren't moments of chaos and heated things that happen, you know, but the core is good and you can feel it when you walk into the house, you know? And that's kind of like how it always seems every time I get to interact with folks from RTM. But that is just a real true thing. I think that's going to be there is that hesitation of like, is this real or is this just more marketing, you know? But the question is that can you shed light on I know that you had a few differences in years of the year that you merged. So what was the actual courtship process like? You know, if you had to lay out like the steps. And I know that some of it was organic and maybe there was other meetings that were added on for different reasons for your firm, but in general, can you lay out what it was for when you merged?
I think the courtship process for us, as I mentioned, Tony came down, we had lunch, and one of the very first questions I'd asked him was, are you profit centers? Because I'd worked in a firm that was profit centers, and it wasn't a good environment. And he exclaimed, um, absolutely not, because that doesn't foster work sharing, that doesn't foster the community that we wanted to be a part of. But then after that, we had weekly calls with Tony, my partner, and I. And that went on for probably 3 or 4 months. And then we went to Schaumburg, met with the group up there for a couple of days. And then Rich was one of the ones that we reached out to and talked to about his experience. And I think that was a very beneficial thing that Tony was willing to let us talk to anybody, and that kind of, in my mind, made it seem like, well, maybe this isn't all a bunch of, rainbows and unicorn type situation that were being sold. So, um, and then after that, uh, we brought in our junior partner and told him what we were doing and things. And then we continued to have meetings, and he had meetings, and let him go through his process. And then eventually we got to the point where we decided to set a closing date, and we closed. And for us, because we really wanted our senior people to be on board and not just spring it on them. It was about a 6 to 8 month process.
Okay, great. And at what point did you tell the rest of the team or the rest of your senior leadership, did you say?
Senior leadership was aware probably about 3 to 4 months before closing. And then we told the rest of the office the week before closing, and that seemed to work out pretty well for us.
For me, it was process was the series of conversations, the meetings in Schaumburg, but then it was really the deal structure, which came together pretty quickly, culminated in a LOI. I would say within 30 days of that, after that initial rainbows and unicorns,
Yeah.
uh, and from there it moved pretty quickly. It really they used an outsourced diligence company, so that was 60 days of intense, supply information, answer questions. We had a lot of stuff professionalized, so it was an easy process, but it did take, it takes time, and you've got to answer questions and kind of push things through or be pulled through depending on the situation, that diligence piece. And, emerged from that, I would say in total, we were probably 9 months, including the preliminary courtship part, but the deal only took 3 or 4 months to consummate from the time of the LOI to actual close. And then did not loop in the staff until the week before, which was, I was actually quite nervous about that. The way I'd operate it was very transparent. Like I was fighting this desire to tell them everything, but until the deal is really going to go through and both parties are happy, my concern was it was going to create a lot of turmoil. So I was anxious, and when I told them, they were all absolutely fine. It was all, stuff I was turning in my head and worrying about, but they were fine because we had that level of trust. They were like, well, we'll see where it goes, but we trust your judgment was really the comments I got. And so that was great. And then HR and accounting show up, basically that next week, and spent so much time one-on-one with each team member that they were very comfortable very quickly. So all that anxiety was for nothing.
Mm, good to hear.
Yeah, our similar process. I think they kind of had streamlined it, so we came in before these other guys. So I think we were, I think, kind of the start of the kind of the big section of mergers after us, but it was very similar process. It's definitely not quick. It definitely took quite a bit of time just because we had six partners just to get all that information relayed, and so all six of us didn't go up to Schaumburg and see all that. So a lot of that was kind of relayed through really, one main person, but just transparency for all the information. And Tony came down here a couple times, just to kind of help relay that, since we had six people in two locations really. So it was a little bit harder for us to navigate, so I'm guessing we were a little bit longer than those time frames, but very similar process. We did the same thing kind of Rich did, tell staff before, and we didn't necessarily have any big major concerns or anything like that. Again, you kind of have a good company, good core people. They trust you. You've been their leader for quite a while, so we didn't really have any trouble or turmoil or really any issues for the transition. Most of our staff stayed. We did have one partner that decided not to come through with the merger, but other than that, everybody else was pretty much on board with it.
Great. And just to ask, what was their reason, if that's all right to ask?
I think that just all the concerns we kind of initially talked about. Most people want to work for a smaller firm or at a smaller firm, right? There's just more concerns and getting pigeonholed that comes when you're kind of part of a big company, and just not knowing how that transition really is going to happen, or know, how your job is going to change. I think he just chose to stay in kind of a smaller company and not get part of that big company feel. And I think that's where Cam's comment was, like, he voted against it for the same reasons. But then once you kind of get into the RTM family, you realize that it's really just small companies, part of a bigger family, right? So it's still a small group that you're working with, a small group of people that are your day-to-day family, and you just have this huge extended family they can use for resources and, just more information and, just experiences. So it's opened up a little bit more without having that big corporate feel that we were all concerned with, that we were going to maybe roll into. So it's definitely much more like a small company feel, just part of a bigger group.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's really important information to share the way that it is a little bit of both, getting
Right.
benefits from both.
Right.
So let's talk about the integration process. I know that in each of your, shares about the dating game and how you came to decide, you've already alluded to this a little bit, but just the actual integration after everything's signed, the deal is done. John, you already mentioned they were there the next day, and accounting sits down and everything was seamless. But talk about, like, yeah, what was it? What was that process, the integration process? How long did it take? How did the team respond throughout this time? What was RTM doing to support? Yeah, just to speak to that specifically.
I mean, the biggest thing I could think is just transitioning everything over, right? You have licenses and software and computers and everything like that. So everything is independent. So it takes a long time to switch all that over.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have any problems with that. I think the biggest thing was just uploading our accounting stuff into their system. So it helped that we were on the same accounting system, and we had 25, 30 people total, and so there's probably in 32 years of data, right? So there's probably a little bit more integration into that, for all that accounting to move over. So that was probably kind of the hardest thing. So there's that time span where you have to stop using something and switching over. So, but really everything else was pretty seamless. Things that kind of came after the fact were more like your servers and your IT integration. So that seems like it takes the longest time, where you're connected server wise into other offices, but you're really still able to work, throughout that whole process. So, I mean, for us, it was pretty seamless, and we never really had any problems or concerns, really moving over.
I mean, our experience was similar. We had all the technology type things going on, but at the time we merged, we were so busy that we really couldn't take on outside work, RTM structural work yet. So as far as our day-to-day things, I mean, they were there for support. We continued to have calls with Tony for a period of time, just checking on us, and we were introduced to other people that would call and check on us, ask what we needed or how they could help. But other than that, the day-to-day really stayed very similar.
Hmm.
Yeah, my experience was similar. The day to day for the teams was pretty much unchanged. Um, the accounting stuff took, I don't know, 30 or 60 days to kind of smooth out, and just with, like Jennifer was talking about, the data transfer and the nuts and bolts of that. Um, it was a little strange in that for probably 2 or 3 months, I didn't get a call from anybody. We've changed the process since then, but it was like, okay, there was a lot of fanfare, but what's happened? What's different? I used that time to reach out to a bunch of principals and just try to build some connections and get to know some people, and would reach out to Tony and say, okay, what's next? What's the next evolution? Which careful what you ask for. So
Oh,
because there were plenty of things I could get involved with. So,
that's good. You're leading me right into the next question.
Can
So
I say
what?
one more thing?
Yeah, I do. Yes.
It was interesting because we were pretty nervous about telling some of our clients. We'd had these clients for 20 years or the 12 years we were in business, certainly, and then the relationships we built before we went off and started our own firm. And actually, that part was pretty smooth. We did not, we had the only client that said they probably wouldn't use us was another MEP firm that we did 2 jobs a year for. Great guys, and they've actually come back to us since that time on some projects, but they said they couldn't hire us since we were part of an MEP firm now. But everybody else is like, well, are you still the people that I called to get work done? And I said, yeah, we're still the guys. So that was a really easy part that I had a lot of anxiety about, but didn't need to have.
Love this. Um, quick question before we get into the hats and you wear today and life today, but culturally, like what happened, when you were getting integrated? Was there any plug into like Teams at the time in terms of Microsoft Teams and like, you know, company communication for your broader team? Or how was everyone looped in terms of the culture and the communication and the feeling a part of the bigger family?
for us, there was a Teams channel for civil, and so they did it by office at the time, and also we created a consolidated civil channel, and so started interacting. Today we do more purposeful or intentional things to, do virtual happy hours or whatever to try to get people to intermingle. And I think that's an evolution, at least since I've joined, because that does help. It's all about, getting to know the other people to really feel part of that, truly integrated and part of that bigger family.
Yeah, we came in before COVID, and it sounds terrible because it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but it's been long enough. I don't remember a lot. I do know that we transitioned to Teams during COVID, which was, I think it was like we came on board maybe like the week before the big shutdown, right? And so for us, that timing couldn't have been better because everything made it navigable during COVID times with virtual things and everything like that. So I felt like we were probably more isolated prior to, so I think mostly things were just via email. There was a lot less companies at the time, a lot less people. So I would say that I mean, we kind of just rolled like we were before, and then we would just reach out to certain people if we had questions or concerns. We were given a lot of flexibility, kind of run things how we did before. We weren't there's no restrictions. There wasn't like, well, you can't spend money on this because of whatever. So I think as long as, we were making good business decisions, we were pretty flexible. But the teams, once we rolled into that, made things a lot more open, a lot more easy to communicate with other offices and other groups and just reach out if you had quick questions. It was easier to navigate. So the company's evolved, which has been great. And so it's really benefited, I think, everybody and more of the companies that have merged after us.
Yeah, I mean, our experience is very similar. You know, we encourage, we try to get our group at all levels to reach out and have peers in there's two other structural offices to kind of develop relationships with their peers in those other offices. So, and that's worked out pretty well.
Great. So let's talk about today and how is today different than way before, pre-merge. What hats are you wearing today? Like, what are you doing that's different than your day to day? What have you shed specifically? What are you enjoying? Is anything different? And also kind of hear a little bit about have things changed for your team? How are they doing now? Any differences that are tangible for them? Has your team grown? Like, yeah, what's changed?
I guess I can kind of start. So I think the biggest thing, we kind of had a reorganization lately, and it's prior to, we tried to group offices and staff together, kind of, I would say, more geographically, some a little bit by discipline. So you kind of had like a little group of people that you could reach out to or talk to, just, business development or marketing things, operational stuff more regionally. And we've reformatted that where it's more by your primary job focus. So for me, that's probably been the biggest hat change lately is I'm, more involved on the leadership side for our um, institutional organizational group. And so that's changed a little bit, and it's tied us a little bit more into people that do the same types of projects every day. So from my staff perspective, it's been great because we've been work sharing with other offices. And if we need a code or a standard or just have a question on something, it's made it a little bit easier to ask questions to other people in other offices where it's much more fluid dynamic. It's easier conversation because you've talked to these people, you've had more conversations, you work with them on projects, and I think it's just kind of opened up communications across state lines a little bit better with this reorganization. And it just takes time, but people get more familiar with other people, who to ask questions to on not only, a senior leadership, which we've had, but more at the lower engineer level as well. So I think it's been really beneficial on that side of things.
Well, that's great. It sounds like new connective tissue in a lot of ways. But that to just clarify, especially for listeners, it's the RTM as a whole reorganizing with those centers of excellence is what they're calling it, right?
Right.
Rather
Correct.
than grouping based on locations and near to us locations, it's grouping based on types of engineering and role focuses. Is that
Correct. Yes,
your
absolutely.
understanding? Okay.
Yeah, it's based on end markets, so institutional, commercial, healthcare and industrial, and then civil and structural or service based, and specialty is like an incubator for other services that are
Cool.
complementary. So we have six, but the MEP groups are all about 100 people, roughly, and
Mm.
civil and structural are in the 60 to 75. So you get critical mass. So all the things Jennifer was talking about are, it's unlocking, I think, some potential that we haven't seen before.
Wow. The fact that RTM continues to find new ways to unlock potential is pretty exciting. Okay, but so back to the prior question, Rich, for you, the hats that you're wearing today, what's changed for you personally and then for your team?
Yeah. So let's start with my team. So the team with a bigger group, there's just more opportunities. So before I was the principal in charge, I'd have a project manager, a project engineer working on, the day to day. They're now able to take on larger teams, develop their skills um, in the context of the civil COE. And so that's really accelerated growth for those people who want that. Um, and we've seen that cascades. So there's tons of opportunity, especially with our growth rate as well. It creates it creates gaps, quite frankly, but those gaps are opportunities for other people. Um, and I think one of the things that is part of our culture is really letting people do the things they like to do most. And it's hard to deliver on that unless you're growing and really thoughtful about, even the transition to COEs will unlock some of that. So for my team members, I've seen a lot of individual growth, just tons of individual growth that I couldn't support in my old structure. Just we weren't big enough, we weren't growing fast enough. For me personally, I like lots of things, so I think I probably wound up with a lot of hats as a result of that. But I enjoy business, leadership development, those aspects. So I'm very much focused on those things now and having a blast. It's work, obviously. But it's that good tired when you go home. So
Mm,
yeah, lots of hats.
cool.
No,
John.
I think for me, maybe just to maybe jump on Rich's bandwagon, that was a really important thing to me when we were in the dating phase, was that we would have create opportunities for our people. Because there's about 15 of us. We were doing work all over the country. And I look back on it now, and I really think that we conscientiously held people back and maybe not deterred their growth, but because we needed them sitting at their desks and pushing projects out the door. And so I think when we were we were courting, that was something that was really important in my mind, that we create opportunities for our people. And I've seen that happen. We've got it. It's fun to see the people that were just focused on themselves and what they were doing or what was on their desk or the project or that, to have their eyes opened up for their thinking more about their team and the others around them and how they can encourage the growth of the people that they're now managing. So that's been a really uh, nice kind of, maybe not, I don't know if I anticipated that much when we were before we merged, but it's certainly a nice icing on the whole process. And as far as hats, I'm kind of like Rich. I like to do so many things that it's hard to just pick one. But I really enjoyed like the leadership development, or I enjoy the relationship aspect of it. Um, with clients, with colleagues. I mean, I know 100 people now and have relationships with them in the RTM world that I never would have met. And I feel like my life's been enriched because of that, because it's just such outstanding people all across the board and at all levels in RTM. So I think that's probably one of the things that's brought me the most joy, seeing the growth in our people, the relationships we've developed, as well as the opportunities in work and work sharing. And, I get a call from Maryland or a call from our Seattle office, and they need some structural help, and I can pass that along to one of our engineers, and then they start developing those relationships and things, and just see that see that growth and development that comes from that. It's pretty fascinating to me. Very, very pleased.
Wonderful. It's a delight to hear that. Rich, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to crack a joke that all of John's new 100 friends are going to come crash his lake house.
Sounds good. Can I
If it
join?
ever if it ever gets finished, it's from the Bain. It's the longest. We have designed and built $120 million projects, but my lake house is still under construction.
Of course. It's the cobbler's
Of
shoe.
course, of course.
So, as we begin to wrap up, what do you, and we've shared a lot, and there might not be anything else that you have left that's unsaid, but in case there is, what do you want to share with other companies that might be considering a merge with RTM or maybe outside of it? And this episode could just be generally educational about what to be looking for. But what questions do you encourage other leaders to ask? And then, like, the cherry on top is, what would you tell your past self if you could? If you could throw a little message in the bottle to the past.
I
No,
guess the one thing I would say is just to be patient. I think all of us kind of sounded similar, where like you merge, you sign on the dotted line, and then you like expect big changes, right? You expect something like something, and like it doesn't come, like there's not substantial changes. So in a way that's good, right? Because you were operating well before, but like everything took a bit of time to kind of roll out and get going, and even just changing the sign on the door, right? So I think just be patient and know that that's a good thing, I guess, in my mind. Looking back, like I was like a little apprehensive about things, but at the end of the day, being patient and it taking time was good. The best thing that we came out of it, I think, was just the overwhelming. You have to have a good culture fit, right? And your operational goals and the way you operate your company have to align, and you have to get a good fit for that. And for us, everybody that we work with in different offices have aligned. They've been super helpful. They've been very pleasant. I mean, that culture fit is super important to make sure that those relationships are effective and positive for everyone involved. And from our standpoint, that's been great, and that's been the best thing about it so far.
I think for me, we'll let Rich finish this up because he's our spokesman. But
No, no.
I think I think for me, I've had a very storied career. I feel like I have. I've been at different firms and I've enjoyed all of them. And I think, like Jennifer said, it is the culture part of it, the camaraderie that comes from it, the willingness to work together and on projects and things has been phenomenal. And I'm so glad that we took the time and the perseverance that it took. Rich talked about the due diligence effort. That was it. We were 14 people. My wife actually volunteered to do our due diligence, and she probably spent hundreds of hours. She still reminds me of that, by the way. But 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 doing that for us and putting all that information together, and personally, I'm so glad we did. As I look around of where we are now compared to where we were, um, it's a really good place to finish up. I think you reminded me, Catherine, that I told you earlier, but I feel like I've come home, and I honestly feel that way.
John, you always want to make me tear up, and we're talking
No, no,
He
no,
engineering.
makes
So,
all
no,
of us tear up.
no. But so that's what I would encourage. Just take the time, listen, work through the process, and if it is a good fit, I've not one day regretted the decision we made.
Yeah, for me, it's really two pieces of advice, whether
Rich,
it's to
take us
my
home here.
yeah, whether it's to myself or to someone else is I hired a broker because I thought I needed something. But like I thought there was something I didn't know about the market or how the process, whatever. And it really turned out to be a really poor experience. Now, I hope that's just me, but I would say take pause, go out and get some more information because it actually was a hindrance instead of a help in my case. But the bigger, broader message, and it's going to echo somewhat what Jennifer and John have said, is first thing is if it's not a cultural fit and not a forced fit in any way, like RTM isn't for everybody, but people who align with our core values and get along with partners like the three of us, you're going to thrive. But if you don't have that and it's a mismatch, it's okay. It's just we're not the right place. And figuring out that match is number one in my mind. That's the advice I'd give. Just find a good match.
Awesome. Okay, you three. Thank you so much. This is a wealth of information. I'm really excited to get to share this with the listeners to Beyond Engineering and the market in general. But well done, and thank you so much for representing RTM today and what it's like to get to become a part of RTM.
Thank you.
Oh, and yes, in our closing, the last question, give us a last closing appreciation for anything, but what's top of mind?
A bigger family. How about that?
I was going to say I'm thankful for partners like Jennifer and John, just like-minded people, and getting to do things I love doing.
Mhm.
I would say the same thing. We get to do what we love to do, and our circle, the circle is so much bigger than those we get to share it with.
My closing appreciation is the fact that a panel conversation about mergers in an engineering firm can get me literally teary-eyed, and I'm not faking it. That is so wonderful and it's like right alongside everything about RTM, you guys, the culture there. So thank you so much for a very human conversation on this topic.
Thank you.
Glad
Thank
John
you.
didn't make you bring out tissues or anything like that.
Right.
Oh,
Mess up the makeup.
not at all. Not at all.
Cool. All right. Thanks again, guys. Until next time, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Engineering, a podcast from RTM Engineering Consultants. To be notified of future episodes and to watch past episodes, please follow Beyond Engineering on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Until next time.